So welcome everyone to this episode of Women Celebrating Women with me, Franny Kirby. This is episode 4, I think. Oh, I'm excited. And with me today is the lovely Amanda Campbell. So Amanda, hi. Would you like to say a little bit about yourself before we get going?
Hello. Right, I always find this bit quite difficult.
No worries.
Okay, so I'm a mum of 2. I live in East London. I am a coach. I'm a certified life coach, and I've got an advanced diploma in the same type of thing. The sort of coach I am, there's many different types of coaches, is I use tools to coach clients through the process of reaching their goals, or just realizing what they want and working in line with their strengths and their values. I mostly coach women who are around the similar sort of age to me. I'm 50. I was 50 last year. That big milestone. And I have relatively young kids. They're 9 and 8. I'm also work for a charity part-time, which I've just started, which has been wonderful so far. Lovely. And I've got a whole array of weird qualifications. For example, I'm trained in body massage, aromatherapy,
love it
massology, Indian head massage, and I did all of that. I had a little sabbatical out of the city. I worked in the city until I had my daughter, and then I helped my husband set his business up, which is a surveying business, and I've done a variety of different things since then, as well as working for him part-time, and I'm currently doing a psychology degree.
Amazing. I love all this. Like, it's there's so much to kind of pick up on that. And I love how you like you're coaching, but you've got that kind of connection to the body when you're doing like that kind of Indian head massage or the body massage. Because I think, I don't know how you sort of feel about this, but there's the kind of connection with our kind of mind, body, spirit, all of that kind of is a really key part, I think, to the journey that we're all on.
Definitely. And even like as the deeper I get, the older I get, and the deeper I get into life, I realize all those sort of alternative therapies when I trained 20 years ago. And actually my mum's an aromatherapist, she trained 20 years before that. Now all of a sudden they're very much more commonplace than they used to be. Mindfulness and meditation and yoga, everyone does it nowadays, all these things. And I didn't mention, but I've got relapsing remitting MS. And the interesting thing about that is that when I go for my hospital appointments in the most clinical of environments, which is the National Neurological Hospital, amazing hospital, they say all the time to explore these other therapies. So they're very, very hot on meditation, on mindfulness, on yoga, and you're talking to a neurologist.
But this is so much. It's such it's such an interesting area of, like, I think, science, that kind of neuroscience. There's so much research being done now around all these very ancient practices like yoga, meditation, where they're kind of finding that actually we can shape and change that kind of neurological patterns that we have going on, and they are so powerful. They have such an impact on the way we kind of think, feel, all of that.
And always, there's this huge focus from everyone, from the nursing team, from the neurologists, from the whole neurology team, a huge focus on remaining positive and upbeat, and also a lot of exercise, which I don't quite hit. But it's sometimes I think then we used to do like 4 hours of very active exercise a week. That can be yoga though, but it's got to be quite active.
Yeah, I love it, because our body, I mean, when we have that connection to our body, and there's something to me about yoga, because I kind of have like a regular practice just generally around lots of different things that are all part of my kind of self-care, but there's something about yoga that brings together so many different elements of like what really helps us. And it's like the breath work, it's connecting to your body, it's really grounding, it's stretching you, it's kind of like where you've kind of like
Yeah.
you know, like where we hold tension, so we've got tension in our like neck or like our
Yeah.
chest, or that it just, and then the other thing that I think is so key and so important, like it, and certainly for in part, you know, if you think about daily practice, is that kind of regulation of your nervous system, and like yoga just has
Yeah.
this ability to really kind of calm and kind of switch on that parasympathetic nervous system, you know, that kind of the rest and recuperate, the kind of the sort of part, the sort of system that just then like, oh yeah, okay, this feels good, this feels
Yeah.
really, I'm relaxed, I feel calm.
And it's so interesting because what I find is when I let that bit go, and I have let this week, I've let that bit go a bit because, as I said, I've started a new job. I have what's called a portfolio career, I think.
I love that, I love that,
um,
yeah, absolutely,
and
we are many things.
yeah, exactly, many things. And I had to submit an essay for part of the coursework with the degree that I'm doing, and I've let that bit go. And when that bit goes, it's like I almost look for something. So I've drunk too much this week because I
Sure.
haven't done that self-care bit.
Yeah.
And it's like there has to be, for me, there has to be a release somewhere.
Sure. There's something that you need to kind of, yeah, to kind of let go.
Yeah.
And then what, so I think any of us can kind of say that there are different times where we kind of like,
Yes.
know that we could be eating better, or we could be
Yes.
drinking less alcohol, or we could be, I don't know, so many different things. So how do you then come back to, okay, like, because I think one of the other key things is that kind of self-talk, isn't it? That kind of
Yeah.
like, do you know what? That's okay. I'm gonna like just come back to this,
Yeah.
rather than that kind of beating ourselves up and going,
Yeah.
oh, I shouldn't have done that, sort of. So how's that part of your, you know, either your coaching or your kind of like
It's
your
quite
daily sort of,
interesting, because I am obviously I'm a woman who's 50. I had a very a very wild sort of youth party.
love it.
A really good time. And you know, if I'm honest, I was kind of known for it. For being a total party girl. So I am well used to that feeling of beating yourself up about things,
Mm.
and I just don't do it anymore. And I think I actually had coaching myself before I decided to explore becoming a coach. And I think that inner awareness and knowing yourself is something that it doesn't, or for most people, definitely for me, it's not something that just clicked like that. I needed to be guided through
Yeah,
that process.
yeah,
And even
absolutely.
now, you know, I self-coach all the time.
Yeah.
So I am someone like today, I've just woken up and I'm like, right, I just need to breathe. I
Yeah,
need to get back on
absolutely.
track.
Yeah.
And the way that I work, I need to schedule my week for next week. And
Yeah.
I actually have to schedule these things in so that I
Perfect.
ensure that I do it and I dedicate more time to self-care. You know, I really need a massage. I'm going to get one this week.
Yeah.
And that's the only way for me. I have to be quite disciplined about
And
it.
that sounds perfect, because it's like there's that combination. I love kind of thinking about our kind of divine feminine and our divine masculine. And to me, the divine feminine is like taking a breath,
Yeah.
coming back. And it's like, okay, well, I know myself really well. I know if I don't schedule it in, then it's not going to happen. But if you do schedule it in, and I know others who will say like they set a timer. So like having a mindfulness spell on your phone, like, you know, all of
Yeah.
us carry up, well, most of us carry phones with us a lot of the time, but instead of using it to kind of just sort of distract and become more unconscious, we can use all of these things, can't we, to kind of become more conscious and go, okay, every 2 hours or something, I'm gonna, that bell goes off, I'm gonna like come back to my breath. Or there's so
Yeah.
many different little things we can do, isn't there, that we
Yeah.
can like build in.
And I think it's taken me a long time to get to this point, you know,
Yeah.
a long time to to sort of really know myself.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of my feelings or a lot of my reaction to things, if I'm honest, are driven by my hormones. You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the thing as women, like we very much sort of, you know, we have a cycle that
Yeah,
kind of does this with our hormones, and there's something, isn't there, about honoring those different stages,
yeah,
that flow, the ebb and flow, I think. And I'm not saying that men don't have an ebb and flow, but I think the hormones that we're kind of
yeah,
up and down with throughout our kind of monthly cycle
yeah,
does definitely lead, you know, lead us to want to lean more into like ebb and flow. So though, you know, those peak times where we feel like kind of like, oh my God, I feel like I'm amazing. And then those kind of, oh, okay, actually I'm feeling like I need to be a bit more quiet or a bit more inward.
yeah,
And I think learning it and understanding those cycles, I think really kind of can help us have like more kind of care for ourselves, rather than like, oh, I'm tired, I'm just going to push through it, or I'm feeling like a bit like I want to kind of be more going into myself. But you're okay.
sorry, I'm just putting my charging my laptop, sorry.
That's okay.
um yeah, and it's interesting because I've only come to recognize that because of perimenopause, I guess.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, because I'm at this stage in my life and it's taken me, but I think it's always been there. And
yeah.
it's funny the way, you know, when you talk about the ebb and the flow, and there's a week where you feel a bit off. So I am a person who during that week has never learned to retreat in that week.
Oh.
That's the week where I go hell for leather.
Right.
And it's really, you know, I've just learned over time and experience that's really not what you need to do. It's a very dangerous week there. You know, when I was young, it would be I would just be out continually, and I'd be, you know, get myself in all sorts of trouble because that was I was literally not quite so level. And so, but it's only now when I approach this, you know, sort of, I'm not menopausal, but I guess I'm perimenopausal because I'm
Yeah,
50.
yeah,
And to be honest, you know, there's huge conversations around menopause and perimenopause at the
yeah,
moment,
yeah,
obviously. And I tend not to join in with them so much because I feel like, you know, my symptoms are relatively minimal
yeah,
to how other
yeah,
people suffer, and I've got other issues going
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Um, so, but it has increased my awareness of hormones, and
Oh,
it's am I frozen?
no, you're fine. You froze for a second, but you come back. You increased your awareness of hormones.
Yes, it increased my awareness of hormones and how that affects you. And I mean, I was on HRT. I've since had to come off HRT for various different reasons. But it has made me realise that actually, you know, it's something to watch out for. It's something to. I've written down how I feel about, you know, on certain days of the week. I've also I journal anyway as part of my self-care. Probably don't journal as much as I should, but you know, I tell people to journal all the time that I coach. Um, and I think that process is really good. It's taught me a lot about that ebb and flow.
Yeah. It's taking, I think there's something there, isn't it, when you're saying about taking a breath and journaling, there's something about it kind of gives us time to pause and kind of reflect. And I think and I don't know if you feel like this, but kind of like as women who are like kind of working with children, with like friends, with social, like, you know, whatever we've got going on, there's a lot going on. So the tendency is for us to kind of be out in the world,
Yes.
and actually coming back to ourselves, and that kind of journaling, and like really listening to that kind of inner voice, those kind of those different parts of us that want to let us know, you know,
Yeah.
certain things that we maybe, if we weren't, you know, when we're kind of out in the world, there's so much to other noise going on that we just can't hear.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, we've all lived through a pandemic. And you
Absolutely.
know, we're in lockdown for quite a large
Yeah,
portion
for
of
over
time.
2 years on and off, for
It
quite
is
a
on and off.
period, lots
Yeah.
of periods of time.
Um, And I think that that can't be underestimated in terms of psychologically. You know, I feel lots of people, not maybe not so much this year, but last year, I feel lots of people were suffering from that overwhelm just from being out and being social, and a lot of pressure to do things.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one, but I think we all just went a little bit crazy and crammed loads and loads and loads of social things
Yeah.
and didn't have that time to stop and pause. And I think maybe, you know, there's a little bit of us that kind of thought, you know, this could
Well,
happen.
we didn't know how long this is going to go on for.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so many things I think that come out of the pandemic, haven't they? That and I think the pandemic did give all of us, or kind of in some ways force all of us to be more reflective and kind of go more inward, because we didn't have that external kind of you know, stuff going on that kind of took us out into the world. We had to come back into ourselves. And it's like, I feel like if there's a kind of rebalancing, that then now we're still all, I feel like we're maybe all still in a little bit of like you said, last year was like, oh my God, we get to do all these things, let's get out and do it. And I feel like now is like a kind of, yeah, we want that, but like, what's the balance? And obviously that's really different for all of us. There's some people who very much get their energy from being around lots of people and doing lots of things, and others who need to kind of recharge, or who where they kind of get their energy from being on their own and not having I mean, I feel like I'm kind of in the middle. I like both. I like being out, and then I like the kind of reflection as well. But
it's interesting because, you know, I would always class myself as being an extrovert and a really social person. However, I think the pandemic has taught me that sometimes I'm not. Sometimes
absolutely
aspects of it that I quite enjoyed, if I'm honest.
Absolutely.
You know, the pressure not to have to do things. And during the start of the pandemic, I started to do my coaching qualification. And you know, that I found that so supportive. Learning about different aspects of psychology. I love the positive psychology side of it.
It's so interesting, isn't it? So much. It's so there's something really empowering about that. I think that the sort of, I think sometimes we can kind of feel, you know, particularly when there's a lot going on, that we don't have a kind of choice about how we respond to things. And I'm not saying that, you know, there aren't emotions to navigate, but there is also a kind of, we can start to kind of make choices about how we, you know, rather than reacting, trying to like come back to like, okay, where am I right now?
I totally agree with that. Actually, I listened to a podcast on anger the other day, and it was really interesting because it was like, you know, people tend to think anger is an emotion you have no choice about because it's a reaction, but actually you have a choice about reaction if you just take a step back. And that's, I think, knowing you have a choice about how you react to things is really empowering, actually.
It really is. And actually, I think, I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, anger hasn't let, you know, anger when it's kind of all over the place and chaotic can, you know, can be kind of very kind of violent and dangerous. But like, I think actually anger can actually be a really valid emotion, and particularly for, and again, getting very gendered here, but it does feel like this, but a lot of women, where like in our kind of Western society being brought up that we're okay to get upset, but it's not okay to get angry. And actually anger can be a real kind of like signal of like, maybe like someone else isn't behaving appropriately, and it's not that we then need to shout and kind of scream, but we can come back and go, okay, well, no, that's not okay. I'm not okay with that. I
mean, it's quite interesting. There's been quite a lot of research, I think, done on you know, anger in sort of the workplace, and how in corporate environments men are sort of allowed to get angry, women aren't.
If women do, they're kind of called overly emotional, or like
for men to get angry is kind of okay, because they're seen as like go-getters, and you know, that sort of determined, dominant alpha type.
But I mean I've also worked with women where actually they haven't learned to kind of really feel anger, and they'll go into kind of real powerlessness, and actually being able to feel anger and kind of allow it in their body really shifts it, and they kind of like, wow, you can see a real difference. There's sort of like,
Yeah.
really kind of, and that's the kind of then the interesting thing about that kind of positive psychology, because I don't know how you kind of feel about this, but there's a balance, isn't there, between spiritual bypassing, where you're kind of like, you're just always trying to kind of be up here, whereas actually there's kind of a validity in like allowing yourself to feel angry or having anger, or and but being able to hold it in a place of like, this is part of like an evolving journey, and it's not, I'm not
Yeah.
angry all the time, or I'm not like, I'm allowed to sort of feel my feelings, sort of thing.
I mean, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? That, I mean, that also that knowledge, I'm not angry all the time. I think when we're in a high state of emotion, afterwards, often when we reflect, it feels like, it can feel like, oh gosh, that mistake is huge. That, I shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to catastrophize stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But as my granddad used to say, everything passes.
Of course it does, and it really does, all of it, all of it. That kind of thing, this too shall pass, applies to everything,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Like, if, and then that comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning about meditation and all these ancient practices, and actually when we can be as present as possible in the moment, things just flow through us, whether it's joy, anger, like just equilibrium. It's all there, isn't it? So
Yeah. I mean, it's such, I find, and that's empowering as well. I think that knowing that nothing is forever, I
yeah,
think that's quite empowering as well.
yeah, absolutely.
The other side I like of positive psychology, there's been loads of research into people that, live long lives.
Yeah,
And it's not just down to genetics. A
no.
lot of it is how they interact with community around them, actually doing good stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and there's so much when you say that, there's so many things I kind of want to respond with, because I feel like there's so much about being of service to others, but not in a way where we overly give, but like kind of like the science of kindness and being kind to people, and then that kind of whole thing about connection, because I think there's also been a sort of more research around addiction, and like I think in the 60s they kind of did all this research where they were like with lab rats, where they kind of like, basically it was like, been seen in a certain way, but the kind of more recent research is sort of showing that actually when people feel connected and like they feel part of a community, that actually those kind of addictive behaviors, it's much easier to kind of like manage them, and they kind of fall away, and connection and community, I think is such a key part of that well-being, and
powerful, yes.
yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
actually it's interesting because we've all gone through history, we're now like nuclear families
Yeah.
everywhere, but actually that's maybe not the best way to live your longest and happiest life. And when I use the word family, I'm talking about friends.
Absolutely. It could be your blood family, or it could be your friends. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So cool. So I'm gonna like start bringing this to an end now, but I like, do you what would you like to end on? What would be your kind of like nugget for those listening today?
So I think, I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit, I think, about my diagnosis of relapsing remitting
Yeah.
MS, just because, you and I have spoken about this as well.
Yeah.
If there's probably people out there that have just been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease,
Yeah.
and we've spoken about how it's a journey, and how actually I've been through so many different emotions with it, and I now feel that I'm in a really good place. So I think I want to say to people that when you get a diagnosis that you don't really like, of a long-term, no, sorry, I've lost my thread, forget that
No,
bit.
it's fine. No, but when you get a diagnosis of something, no, totally fine. So, but you're right, when you get a diagnosis of something long term, this too shall pass, but also about that acceptance. Yeah. What would you like to say about that journey to acceptance?
I think so. When I was first diagnosed, I first felt relief because I was like, I don't have a brain tumor, because I knew I had something neurological.
Yeah.
And then I felt, okay, this is fine. And I had a decision to make about whether to go on meds or not, because I'd had 2 attacks, but they'd been quite far apart.
Yeah.
And then the neurologist said you really should, because you don't know, you could end up with a disability. It's unpredictable. And I think that's the thing that's difficult, living with that unpredictability.
Yeah.
Makes it really hard.
Yeah.
And then I had an MRI on my back, and they found some more lesions in my spine. And I have to say that almost hit me harder, because I'd assumed that I just had these 2 attacks in my brain. I had no evidence that I'd had any attacks in my spine.
Anywhere else. Yeah.
By that point, I was already on treatment anyway, so in a way, it reiterated the fact that I should be.
Yeah.
And I think actually, like last year, I had a bit of a funny year. I think I turned 50. I was coming to terms with this diagnosis, coming to terms with being on medication. And something at the back of my mind was really bothering me. And I didn't think it was the actual diagnosis, because I am a positive person and very much I live for today.
Yeah.
And I decided that what I didn't like was the label.
Yeah.
I didn't like the label, or carrying around the label as an MS warrior, I think is the which is what the charities use. And I thought, I don't know if I really fit that. I don't know if I fit that. I don't feel, I think I'm just not a lover of labels in general.
Yeah.
I don't really like the menopausal woman label.
Absolutely.
And I think actually now I've sort of allowed myself to lose that label. The positive side of it is that I kind of live my life in a different way. So I've always been active, but I do try to incorporate more fitness, not just because it's good for neural pathways, as you mentioned earlier, but also because now I can do it. I don't know if in the future I might not be able to.
Absolutely. So make the most of what you can. Absolutely.
So, and that's really, so anyone who's got a diagnosis, I would say just take the time and sit with it. Forget about the label. Think about you as an individual, because
that's so powerful.
That's, and how you feel, and just it's all a journey, isn't it?
It
Always.
really is.
Don't stop learning.
We don't, but that's so important, isn't it? And I think that could be any diagnosis, whether it's autoimmune or anything else. It's like, forget, the label sometimes, like you said, it gives us something. It might give us some validity around what we're experiencing, that we're like, okay, so that's what it is. But it's that you're still that individual. You're still, and actually, whilst they have their value labels, can sometimes feel like they put us in a box, and we doesn't quite fit that box, do we? And actually, we're still that individual, and looking at you're so full of life and kind of, like you said, real kind of positivity, that
thank you.
You wouldn't even think about it, like you wouldn't even, because I think all of us probably have perceptions of what certain labels mean, and I think it's really, really good to kind of bust some of those myths, I think, isn't it? And just say, I'm still an individual, I still get to do this, and I still get to enjoy my life.
That's today, not
absolutely. Oh, it's been so good to talk with you today, Amanda, and we'll make sure there's a comment and a link for anyone who's interested in like finding more out about your work, and so that they can get in contact. But thank you so much. I've really loved having this discussion.
So much. Yeah, me too. It's been great.